Yeah, it's actually working. That's great. Okay, great. So it's going to be an InsurTech talk today with Tommy Ashman. So you're going by Tommy, Thomas, or Tom?
I am going by Tom preferably, but I've gone by all three of them, so
okay,
none of them insult me.
Okay, cool. Oh, fantastic. And so it's the first time that we're going to do that Facebook Live. We've done the previous one with Jason Cass. That was for the program, the growth program. And first of all, we need to say a couple of thanks to the sponsor who give us a couple of time, who give us the beautiful office. We want to try to get into there.
I'll try to get into the camera here between you guys.
Sure.
So, hi everybody, thanks for coming out tonight. Hi to everybody on Facebook Live. We're sitting here at Carbon 5. It's a digital product consultancy. What that means is we work with our clients to develop software products like mobile applications, web applications. We have 5 offices across the U.S., Seattle, San Francisco, Santa Monica, New York, Chattanooga. About 70 people in those offices across 3 disciplines. So we have developers, designers, and product managers. If you have any questions tonight, feel free to hit me up afterwards. Facebook Live, if you see this and you have any questions, drop a line to Gilad here, and he can put you in contact with me. Thank you.
Good. Thank you very much. And guys, usually, so the way that it works, usually we're sitting there, but it's more intimate, so feel free to come closer. And the way that it works, it's a fireside chat. We have the fire there, and maybe we have another one over there. And it's very open. So we're going to have a discussion. Feel free to ask questions. And it's a little bit, we're going to take the conversation wherever we want. And especially with the Slingshot Aerospace, there are so many things to ask, from the business to how to start a startup, the image processing, the AI, is it just a buzzword or more, and all the things that they are dealing with. So I think that we can start with, what do you guys do?
Certainly. That's a good question to start with, and I'll try to keep it as high level as possible. What we do, starting with the approach of how we do it, is we solve problems that are geospatial in nature. And when you really think about it, any company or government agency that runs any kind of operations that are in the spatial and time realm, which is pretty much any company ever, can gain value from geospatial insights. And when I say geospatial insights, I mean, imagine if you haven't before, that there are satellites and there are airplanes and drones, and they're taking images of the Earth every single day, more so this year than last year, and more so next year than this year. And a lot of that data just doesn't get used. It doesn't get exploited. And exploit sounds like a harsh word. It's a word that I've used in the military, yeah. But it does describe well what you can do with imagery, especially when you start to get imagery that is collected on a high frequency basis, where a machine might be able to detect patterns that a human analyst would never have the time or even maybe the intellectual capacity to see. And so what we do is we build models to apply to these large data sets and derive insights for businesses or whoever can make that information more valuable for the way that they do their business.
So, okay. So how you as the individual, right? You've been, before we jump into that, how about tell us a little bit more about your history? Because originally this meetup was supposed to be last week, and then Tommy called me and said, listen, I was called to reserves duty, so let's postpone it by a week. So
sure.
How about tell us a little bit more about your background, Air Force and stuff like that?
Sure. So I am currently an Air Force officer in the reserves. And for 10 years, I was doing the same job as an active duty officer. And so for the last week, I thought I had it all worked out where they didn't need me, and then last minute they called me up and said they did need me. So sometimes that's just the way of things, and I do apologize for that.
No.
And so I started out, I attended the Air Force Academy in Colorado Springs. I studied space operations. And I did that because I always had an interest in space. As a kid, I had the Mars posters on my wall. I didn't know if I wanted to be an astronaut because I didn't really want to be a pilot, but I've always thought it would be cool to go to space or even be involved in missions that are doing that. And I'm still interested in that, but that kind of explains why I went in the Air Force to begin with.
I was like in astrophysics, so it's completely different.
Well, space operations, it's somewhat of it stems from mechanical engineering, but it has a very specific focus in the Air Force trying to run a ground station operating satellites. And then so in my Air Force career, I've moved around a lot. I spent some time as a munitions and missile maintenance officer. And then I had the opportunity to cross-train into the intelligence career field. And in that field, I was assigned at the Joint Space Operations Center up at Vandenberg Air Force Base, supporting the space mission there. So it was really quite a fun adventure to be able to come full circle back to space. Mm-hmm. And now to be applying that expertise in my business is really exciting.
Cool. So you have 1, 2, 3 partners?
There are 3 partners, yes.
And how did you guys came out, turn into a team and come up with the Slingshot?
Okay. So this gives me an opportunity to tell the origin story, I think, which is a pretty good story. It started out when a year or 2 ago, I found myself in Central California surrounded by quality vineyards in every direction that I could look.
You're talking about vineyards.
I'm talking about vineyards, so grab your wine.
No worries. Continue, please.
And I saw that as an opportunity to kind of merge my interest in wine, I suppose, with my interest in space technologies. And as I started to think through the solutions, I thought, well, how could we, the most practical way that I saw to start to bring value to farmers and vineyards was to maybe look at how drones could be used. And so I started talking about all kinds of ideas and actually met Mel during this time. And we got excited about, what we did was we designed an experiment really over the summer. And this was only last summer, although it feels like years ago now. So we've done a lot in this past year. But we designed an experiment. We got together with a local vineyard in the area. We built a small fleet of fixed wing and rotary aircraft, and we convinced some sensor companies associated with FLIR to let us mount a thermal sensor and an RGB sensor. We went out and collected data on a weekly basis, and then what we actually did was we adapted the Landsat evapotranspiration algorithm, and that was an algorithm that NASA developed to determine the rate of water loss of crops over large areas. And so we adapted that for use on a much finer scale so that we could do that using the drone collection on a plant scale, which would allow the farmer to see that water loss variability within his field, not just on a whole field basis. And the idea there was that he could adjust his irrigation schedule, get a more uniform crop, be able to predict his yields. And so we did that. It was very successful. We did that on our spare time with a handful of talented interns. And our third co-founder was involved at the time too. David is Mel's brother-in-law, actually. And he really rounded out the team because Mel and I both come from the Air Force. David is a serial entrepreneur in Austin who has built data platforms for fintech, for insurance. He's raised money before. And so as we started to turn that experiment into a business, we had a little bit of a pivot, and we decided we didn't necessarily want to be in the drone collection business, but we wanted to build the same kind of algorithms using the most advanced technology. We realized the potential of all that data and the insights that could be drawn from it, and so we decided we would get our data through partnerships, and not just drones, but with satellite providers and with aerial providers. And not just imagery, but there is radar and hyperspectral data.
Just to the follow-up question, It's like besides explaining the RGB and the spectrum of if we're talking about only on the visible spectrum,
Yes.
Are you doing anything which is hyper, and what other elements you're taking and what you're driving from it?
Yes. So all of that is on the roadmap for the business that we've kind of laid out. Initially, we are focused primarily on 4-band imagery, which is typically how the imagery comes down from a lot of imaging satellites, red, green, blue, and there's usually an infrared band, which is beyond the visual. So I guess that counts.
Yeah, sure.
Yeah.
Why not? No, that's good. So you started with the farmers, then you had the third guy,
David
from Austin. Was it the guy that we met back in downtown LA?
Yes.
Okay, brilliant. Okay, I know the guy, at least that. And was that the first pivot? Or did you have any other pivots in terms of the business?
So that was the significant one, I suppose. I wouldn't even call it a pivot, because at that point is when we formed Slingshot. So prior to that, I consider that a previous experiment. And I actually remember pretty vividly that coming up with the name Slingshot with Mel. We were in a coffee shop. It's not a very exciting story, but it's a vivid memory for me. And we brainstormed for about an hour. And when the name hit the table, we both were very excited about it. Coming from our space backgrounds, Slingshot is another name for a gravity assist transfer orbit that you may be familiar with. Apollo 13, the movie, they used the Slingshot orbit. And also the business analogy works very well, that we slingshot our customers to success.
Is that the
A
slogan?
little bit cheesy. No. That's not the slogan.
No, it's very good. It's like put on the Apollo 13 sticker, and it's like we slingshot you. And
Sure, absolutely.
You saw Tom Hanks in the movie. You can, if they give you cease and desist, you know that you made it. No, it's not bad. You have collaboration with NASA, right?
That's right.
Who else?
A number of data providers. We have a strategic partnership with a commercial satellite company called Planet. It used to be called Planet Labs, a San Francisco-based startup. What's really interesting about Planet is they have an entire constellation of small satellites that they call doves. And they have enough of them up there now that they can image everywhere on the Earth every single day. So think of your home. They're getting a picture of it every single day.
No kidding. That's a little bit scary, but okay. Which it's great, because later on we would really like to see how we tie it back to insurance or everything else. Because when I ask people if you have any question, it's like, oh, can you actually in real time see what's going on with my direct side, and then actually go back and reverse and see an auto crash. It's like, I'm not really sure that they do that, but can they do that? Or is it on a daily basis?
So this particular data set is a lower resolution. It's only 3 meters. So you often have that trade-off where if you're getting high resolution imagery, it's usually on the lower end of the spatial side, resolution side. So to see an auto crash, you might need aerial imagery, which would be higher spatial resolution, but it might only be collected once or twice a year. So you'd be very lucky to catch the crash.
Okay.
So could we use satellite imagery to solve traffic jams, or what's that conversation?
So the question was, can you use satellites to capture traffic jams?
Yeah, that's an interesting use case that we have thought of. It strikes me that if you have all that GPS data, you may not need to tag the cars with overhead imagery. It might be easier. But those kind of patterns are definitely in the realm of what you might solve with satellite imagery at a high frequency, sure.
What about catastrophe situations? Was this house flooded? Was it burned to the ground? Do I need to send an adjuster, or do I just send them a check?
Yes. So now you're getting into one of the insurance use cases of claims triage that we think really has a high potential, and I can go into that solution.
Sure, no, that's a perfect segue. I actually paid him to take us to insurance, and it's like, sure, go for it.
So we've talked with a lot of insurance companies, and they realize that they want to provide a better customer experience to their customers, and one way to do that is to improve the speed of paying out a claim after a natural catastrophe. In order for them to do that, they need to have rapid validation that claim is a legitimate claim. And in order to do that, they need to validate how much damage that property has sustained. And so our approach to doing that is use our satellite images that get the rapid coverage as soon as the clouds clear, or to get through the clouds, you could use SAR imagery. But if we're just talking about imagery, satellites are useful for assessing. So there's two kinds of satellite imagery. I've been talking mainly about the high frequency, low resolution. What's great about that is it's scalable and it's relatively inexpensive compared to tasking a high resolution satellite. So we want to make the most use of that kind of data set. Mm-hmm. And what you can do with that is, for one, you can see things that are big enough, for example, a building footprint. And if you look at a before and after building, and you can measure where that footprint is and it's changed significantly, you have a pretty good indication that maybe that house is significantly destroyed. You can also combine that with floodwater masks, or with predictive analytics if you've previously looked at how much risk that house is exposed to based on historical claims and historical weather. And then if those similar conditions are met again, you have real-time weather on a similar property. There's a high probability of claim, and now you have a discrepancy in the footprint. You can maybe make an assessment that house is damaged only from satellite imagery. And prior analysis.
Let's take that example. We had 3 hurricanes, right? Texas, Florida, Puerto Rico. What is the value that you providing the carriers? What can they do with that?
Mm-hmm. So after a hurricane, these carriers are going to be flooded with claims.
It's a little bit redundant.
No, it's okay. They'll be flooded with claims, and so the longer that those claims have to wait to be verified, and a lot of times the way they do it is they'll send a person out to the property, which they might not be able to access it for days or weeks. Or even if you're using a drone, sometimes it's hard to get in there and do an assessment.
Drones, it's last year's hottest topic. Everyone has a drone, at least 1 or 2.
That's right. Yeah. And drones can be useful for that purpose. But after a catastrophe, everything's
reach the drone.
Yeah, that's right. It's a mess. And so, the more you can do from overhead, that means you can start to triage and prioritize the claims that you're responding to. And if you can pay it out faster, that means confidently. That means that it's done, and there's no risk of that claim progressing into a more expensive problem.
I've seen satellite imagery used. Local communities also like it because the sooner they know that this house is completely destroyed, the sooner they can go and clear it out, reduce the hazards of disease spreading, additional fire hazard created and so on by having to wait for the adjuster to come out. So if you can do that.
So basically here you're making sure that the adjuster's time is well spent, more efficient. The claim cycle, which usually helps for the carrier brand of providing the service and finishing the claim, paying the claim, is way faster than that. And unfortunately, especially with the floods in Texas and what's going on in Puerto Rico, even if they have drones, fleets of drones, they can't really reach it if they like it. Yeah.
That's right. And you bring up. We're talking about the floods in Houston, Texas, from Hurricane Harvey, Hurricane Irma. I'd like to tell a quick story. We had the opportunity over the summer to PAE, who's one of our government partners, called us up and said, "Hey, we're working with Team Rubicon. Can you guys help us? Because we heard you could do some things with floodwaters." And we jumped on it. This wasn't a paid project or anything, but we rallied the team. We had a full team, in the office, and we actually built a floodwater mask that could identify specifically the brown floodwaters in Houston, and we had to actually account for the oil that was in the water. And once we had that, we applied it every day, and we were giving that to the relief crews. Team Rubicon organizes veteran volunteers, sends them out to rescue people and provide food supplies and things like that. And so these crews were able to find the safest routes in, where to set up staging areas. So that was just a really proud moment for us that we were able to support that.
That's cool.
Yeah.
All of that just from satellite images, or you blend your own imaging?
We actually use satellite imagery and aerial imagery for that.
Cool. So when we go into your website, you talk about defense, commercial and residential. Following a little bit of the segue for the insurance part, what do you do for residential?
Residential insurance?
Yeah.
Sure.
We are in insurance now.
Yes, we are insurance. Right. So I talked a little bit about claims, and so that applies to residential as well as commercial. Mm-hmm. There's also an underwriting solution that we can provide, and the way that that's useful is currently underwriting sections of insurance companies will, from my understanding, correct me if I'm wrong, professionals, they'll send out an adjuster periodically, maybe once a year, once every 3 years, and make sure that the policy that was written for that house is still accurate, that there aren't any new risk factors, and anything, an example of a risk factor is a not so well maintained pool or a trampoline, perhaps.
Yeah. A pit bull.
A pit bull,
yeah.
Which is tough to do.
In your
from the air.
resolution, it will be hard.
Yes.
Unless it's a 3 meters pit bull.
Yeah. That's a big risk.
That's a big risk, man.
And if you can also start to take into account the proximity of that house to hazards in the area, like if it's along the edge of a forest, there's a high risk of wildfire burning down that house. And so those are the things that we look at for the underwriting solution, and we provide a risk score. We put that house in the risk category based on all those factors that we would derive from the imagery.
One of the problems I've encountered is that, for example, roof type, if you go to states like Oklahoma, where they suffer a lot of hail,
sure.
Everyone tells you they've got a hail-resistant roof and that their entire building is made of concrete and steel. Most of those people are fibbing. And being able to identify that from a satellite, how possible is that with the technology that you have?
Yeah. Are you asking identifying head damage or identifying?
Identifying the roof type
right.
while you're underwriting it.
Right, exactly. And so with high resolution satellite imagery, that is possible.
Mm-hmm.
So
not with
that would be once a year?
So what you would have to do is task the imagery to collect that specific house when you needed it.
Okay, so the level of imagery you get from a Google Maps or a general passover, you wouldn't be able to do it from that. You need it dedicated.
That's right. And so you can get that either from a dedicated collect from a satellite, or you can get high enough resolution from an aerial flyover.
So, like in a ballpark kind of way, how much does it cost to have a satellite go look at a particular house? You know, like what order of magnitude? Like, is it tens of thousands of dollars? Like how much?
Yeah, I don't know if I can give you a number. It's a lot. It's up there.
Yeah.
The more volume you can do, it makes that kind of proposition a lot more.
Like go in a big
If you're-
line and get all the houses.
That's right. Or if you're just doing, if you're looking at enough houses, you can almost lease the entire satellite and task it as needed.
So what are your customers? Would that be the carriers? You have agents? Who subscribe to what you're doing?
Our customers in insurance would be the large carriers themselves, especially the ones that have been thinking about these kind of problems and are willing to, co-create the solution with us using our capabilities and integrating that into their systems. So I separate out not all carriers because at this stage anyway, we're not coming to carriers who haven't thought about this and saying, here's your CAN solution. Because the way that this is implemented could be a little bit different. Insurance companies do business different ways. They have different processes.
Okay. So you have several competitors, right? AmFam have one of them, forget the name now. And this is great to break out because I have it earlier in the notes. It's a Greek philosopher Lab's name, and they do something very similar. And they go and they provide subscription for a specific address, and they will give you the information about if something changed in that address. It can be now, it can be like a year later when they have the better resolution. And they try to approach not just the carriers, but also the agents. Can you break it down and reach out to the agents, or can you focus at this point only on the big carriers?
So to date, we've been focused on the big carriers. It's absolutely makes sense that you could go after any different parts of the value chain.
Oh, that was just a staging for the next question of like, okay, great. So you're going after the carriers. What were the challenges to sell to the carriers?
Yeah. So as this room may know, what I've found out is insurance is an old industry. It's a long-standing industry. Somewhat slow to change, long sales cycles. So those are all challenges. Also, approaching an insurance executive as a startup can be challenging to show that we have the credibility to solve their problems. What gives us a lot of credibility is our strong relationships with our government partners, with NASA, with Planet. And we really see this as a differentiator, having our foot in the defense sector and the government sector. And one of these differentiators is that through our defense contracts, we have access to unique sources of information. And I'm not saying that we would be able to necessarily use that information directly because of the privacy concerns, but what it does do is allow us to make better models.
Okay.
And those models can be applied across the board.
So is that your advantage? Is that your secret sauce, or what is it?
That's one of them. I would say our secret sauce is our team. I just love to brag about how great our team is. We've got engineers from SpaceX who worked on landing the rocket booster on the postage stamp in the ocean. And I've already talked about my other two founders, who I regard highly. And so,
Sure. Okay. So you have brilliant people, you manage to do what every startup, founder needs to do, which is like, let me hire people who are smarter than me, better, and I'll manage them to get to this something which is amazing, which is beautiful. And you target the carriers, which we all know, a little bit stale, a little bit behind. So how do you handle that long sales? It's one of the biggest challenges, and I'll be happy to hear more about what other challenges you faced during working with the various carriers.
Sure. Honestly, it's a lot of cold outreach in the beginning, and then building and fostering relationships. And it does take time. When we started out looking at the commercial sector, we weren't even sure in the beginning that insurance was going to be where we should focus first. We did a lot of market outreach to other industries, oil and gas, shipping, agriculture, and we discovered that the property insurance companies were at least calling us back. So we followed that thread, and we started to build relationships. One example is we have an advisor who is now a champion of ours from Munich Re, who we met just
Very
from,
active.
yes.
Yeah, Munich Re, AXA, fantastic. Allianz as well.
Yes. Yeah. So that's a big part of it, building relationships, and
Okay.
I guess that's the answer.
And you guys have been around for how long?
About a year officially.
Officially,
Yes,
okay. And you already managed to sign a couple of customers.
that's right.
And there was a point that you went to Techstars.
We did. Techstars LA was a really great experience. It was the inaugural class of Techstars LA, and we were really fortunate to have gotten into the program. And if you're not familiar with an accelerator program, I can tell you how this one worked. I don't know if they're all the same. But in the beginning, the first 3 weeks, they basically run you through a gauntlet of speed dating, I would call it, with mentors.
Okay.
Which is a great way to learn because it forces you to get your story straight, and the questions they ask challenge your assumptions, and coming out of there, it set us up really nicely as a team to know where our strengths and weaknesses were, and Techstars also comes with this network of people, mentors, and investors. And so it set us up nicely for our fundraising round. And I would say it accelerated us probably a year beyond where we would have been had we not done Techstars. So that's great.
Any tips to someone in the audience or someone who will see that later? Besides, go to Techstars.
Is the audience, any of you guys startups?
No, but we work with a bunch of startups, so I'd say
Okay.
about 50% of our clients are.
Okay.
So, I mean, any knowledge you have to share with that, we appreciate.
I think that we have most of the insurance today.
Yeah, I'm considering doing a startup, so it's a little bit working on it. Nothing that I can talk about yet.
Still in stealth mode.
Yeah.
I don't know. I would say that if we're on the topic of just entrepreneurship, entrepreneurship is not. I don't think it's for everyone, but not to discourage anyone. I think I had a rosy view that entrepreneurship would be so much better than having a real job. Not that being an Air Force officer is really a normal job anyway. But now I kind of think that it's just different, and different is kind of what drew me to it. And being in the military, I moved around every 2 to 3 years to a new state or a new country and a new job. And I always viewed that as a way or an opportunity to redefine myself. And so jumping into the startup world was just chance to go even bigger on my redefinement, I suppose.
So what else did you put that from your military service?
I'm sorry.
What else did you drew from your experience 10 years in the Air Force?
Sure.
How did that help you to be a better entrepreneur?
Yeah, I think it's for the business I'm doing specifically, it's been very valuable because I had to think in a way that was solving problems in the same way that we're doing for business. We have this process that we use in intelligence. It's called. We use a lot of acronyms in the military. So I don't want to hit you with acronyms, but it's TCPED: tasking, collection, processing, exploitation, and dissemination. And in planning any kind of military operation, which could be applied to the business as well, you first have to think, do I have the information I need to apply to a scenario and know what the outcome is going to be? And if I don't, then I need to figure out what technology can collect that information. I need to contact those people and have them task that asset. And that could be a bottleneck because you're competing with other people's planning missions. Once you can get that tasked, and now you need someone to analyze it and produce something of value that can be easily consumed by the person that makes the decision. And that can also be a bottleneck because there are only a certain number of analysts. So that whole process of thinking through how to solve things, I think, has been valuable for me. There's also the leadership aspect. I had a chance to lead a number of people, different teams.
Yeah, from my humble experience in the Army, it was more about there's the mission, there's the goal, you need to reach that goal. And then when you take that to the business side, you realize that you need the same attitude, but then it's a question of what you just talked about in terms of intelligence. You always need to verify the information. But when it comes to business, you don't have access to all the data. It's not because defense has so much budget that you can, use satellites. And it's very hard to really validate that what you need is what it is. And many startups fail on wrong assumptions that they cannot validate. But putting that aside, you're actually providing the satellites for the various companies so they can get a better understanding of what they're doing, if it's for the underwriting part, or I don't know, if you guys are going to do agency engagement and going like, hey, your policy, you don't have a swimming pool, now I see a swimming pool because I just ping your address and you have a swimming pool, man, or later on for claims. So it's a very interesting value proposition for whatever, if it's the different levels of this industry. Beside my very short research into the field, what are your competitors? Who are you trying? Are you trying to do first to market, second but better? Who else is out there?
Yeah. In the insurance space specifically.
That's before we went to commercial, still in residential.
Yes.
No.
No, I mean, one company I should mention who, from my research, focuses mainly on property attributes for underwriting escape analytics. And the great thing about us is being cross-vertical and heavy presence in the government side of things. We don't necessarily have to worry too much about vertical specific competition. And if you go a little bit broader, the big elephant to mention would probably be Orbital Insight. They're a great company. They have a lot of money behind them. They started out and had a lot of success in financial sectors, predicting futures based on things that they could see, and they seem to be maybe moving into some different markets. They're a great number, not a great number, but there are a handful of competitors that I could mention. But there's so much opportunity here that I feel like we don't even need to worry about competitors because there are just so many problems that could be solved. There's room for a lot of companies in the value chain, from data collectors to model builders, data processing, and solutioners. That's a word. And in the end, I think in this industry, you'll start to see a lot more partnerships. Certainly, we see the value of partnerships because if you pick any of a combination of folks from that value chain I just described, you end up with a super solution that any one of those companies might not have been able to provide by themselves.
Okay, so if we're taking that couple of steps forward, right? And I usually like to ask, how do you see that plays forward, and who will win at the end based on what advantage and what surprises? But you're talking about not the data lake, but the big soup, or everything will be together. How is that going to change, or how will that impact the industry? Because now you're introducing something new. We have the buzzword of the drones. It's local. It doesn't scale unless you buy more and more drones and start getting agents or drone pilots in every state. How the satellite and what you guys doing on this soup, how would that change how we do business?
It's hard to say.
Well, it's an assumption.
Yeah, of course.
My voice is like, yeah.
I would say that you will always need companies that can come in as a new perspective and solve a problem. A lot of the, if I use the Air Force as an example, they've traditionally been focused inwardly on developing capabilities, and they're just now starting to realize, just like some of these big carriers who have innovation groups and would like to do all of this themselves and have all the other carriers as customers. They just can't move fast enough to keep up with things like breakthroughs in computer vision algorithms or the latest neural nets and what it requires to have enough computing power in the cloud to train them and deploy them. And so, all that to say, I don't know how it'll shake out, but I think partnerships are valuable.
No, that's very important. Any questions?
Yeah. So I'm wondering, what are like the state of the tools for doing like satellite computer vision? Like, are there like open source commercial libraries like everybody uses, or like are you using the same tool that you would use to figure out if something is a hot dog or not? Like what does that look like right now?
Yeah, there are a lot of open source libraries and processes that it's important to stay on top of because a lot of times they drive the front edge of capability. There's also interesting and proprietary ways to combine all those open source technologies in unique ways.
So are there like specific, like if you're going to take satellite images, like you got to use X library or whatever?
There are. I can't tell you.
Fair enough.
But I go to OpenCV at the beginning just for the image processing.
Yeah.
It's like, Okay. I think that we're reaching a good point here. Anything else?
Can I ask you a question?
Yeah, sure. Go ahead.
I would like to know who your hero is.
You're doing the fireside. Nice. Nice. Very nice. So, as a child, I had the Asterix and then Spider-Man, but as I grew up, it was more for Batman because he was a man that figured out tools. He was a freaking extremely rich person, which is also some sort of a fantasy, but it was most definitely Batman.
Batman.
Yeah, after Spider-Man and Asterix. Do people know who Asterix is, by the way, here? Yeah, okay, great. The European guys. Fantastic. Someone, yeah. So, yeah, what else? So the thing was that we had a discussion before. We wanted to make sure that we go through at least a couple of the questions as preparation. I said, hey, how about we're going to do like a little bit of a quick fire round? It's like, oh, who's your hero? What's your favorite book? What is it? Oh, no, sorry. It was which book are you going to buy as a present to someone? It's more of a Tim Ferriss question.
Yes.
Yeah. So what is it?
Oh, is that mine?
Yeah, that's for you.
Well, I think my favorite book is Ender's Game. So.
Which one? The first one?
The first one. So I would.
What did you think about the
easily
Shadow
buy that as
series?
a gift.
The Shadow series, the Bean.
The Shadows. Those were very interesting. I mean, Bean. It describes a world where people like Bean can be on the computer behind the scenes and having huge influence on the events of the world. So I think that's a.
And this is for the geek crowd that watches
Yeah.
us. Yeah. It's like, okay.
Those are fun scenarios to think about.
Dude, I'm like now into the second Forming War, so it's like I can't wait for the next book. Are you?
You have to sympathize with the
Which one?
with the
Game of Thrones?
invading species. Formers.
Okay, yeah, sure, why not? I don't see how, but yeah, let's go with that. Are you an audiobook person, Kindle or paper?
I was Kindle for a while. I seem to have gone back to paper, the paper books,
Sure.
just because it sits there and it reminds me to read it.
I have many of those that part I read, and most of them just game test. And I became an audiobook person and many podcasts recently. It's the move to LA. If back in New York I could take the subway and just somehow read like this, LA turned it into whatever place. Any other good question for that? It's like, besides favorite color, of if you're a dog or a dolphin person? Okay.
Astroflow, image recognition.
Oh.
Yeah.
Finally, a good one.
That's certainly one of the tools that we've explored using. We're experimenting with it. Yeah, it's. I mean, all of these things go into your toolbox, and you try not to get it too tied in there where we can't sub out the components when something new comes along. But that's certainly a valuable one for me.
That was good, actually, because I think that next time we start with this silliness, people will relax, then we go back to more geekish technical questions, which is fantastic. And then we can sort of close it with the business side, which we'll see. You're about to close a round. You cannot talk about it too much.
Can't talk about it too much. Yeah, we are about to close our seed round.
Yeah, okay. Give or take a number or a range, or can you provide any information on that?
I would say it's a healthy seed round for a company where they're at. You know, we had a lot of interest, and I think we were even oversubscribed for what we were looking for, and I think that's great. And we just need to ride this wave now. Continue to deliver. It's just really exciting because now we can use that to grow our core technical team and take on more of the customers in the pipeline. It's an exciting time.
So we had a couple of startups here in the past, and they were more web. So they did that KPI, and for them, what they went to the market. And while it's technology, it's not internet, pure internet that the Silicon Valley is accustomed to. How was the fundraising? How did that go? Go ahead.
So don't know if I understand the question.
Okay, I will. Most of the VCs are accustomed to a certain internet KPI that they can work and easily evaluate the value of the company.
Okay.
What is your metrics, or what did you sell them in order to evaluate your company?
Mm-hmm. So a large part of what we sold them and continue to sell is capabilities of our team, the individual accomplishments that we've had individually prior to the company. And then a large part of it was that we also we already have revenue positive. So that certainly helped. And that comes from our customers on the aerospace side of the house, primarily at this point.
Okay, let's leave it.
Sure.
Yeah, I don't want, you didn't close the round, so when you close it, we'll talk about it more details as cost factor. Okay, guys, I think that we can close it at this point. Thank you very much, Tommy, for coming. Thank you very much, guys, for coming in, for Carbon 5 for hosting us. And yeah, cool.
Thank you so much for having me.
Yeah.